Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have with here today Mr. Erkang Zheng, the CEO of JupiterOne, a leading company in cybersecurity. Mr. Zheng was chosen by the Software Report as one of the top 25 cyber CEOs of 2021. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let's get to the real question. What drink do you have with you today?
Well, I've got a cup of tea right here with me. It's in a Starbucks mug, but it's actually some tea. I usually don't drink coffee in the afternoon, only in the morning. However, I don't know. Can you tell it's tea? It's almost 5, so it might be whiskey. And you can't really tell.
Yeah, it could be. So my first question for you today is, what was life like before you came to the US?
Oh, wow. It's been a while. It's been more than 20 years. Well, I was born and grew up in China, so it was fun. It was great, and it's just I guess the typical high school, middle school kid type of life, right? So lots of schoolwork, and then you kind of goof around with friends after school, and trying to keep up with the latest things that might be fun to do. I don't know. A computer was pretty new at the time, and I actually remember my grandfather at the time. I lived with my grandparents in China, and he wanted me to get into computers. Right? He actually bought a computer. I think it was like a 586 or something, or 46 Pentium computer, and hook it up to at home and wanted me to play with it. I didn't want to do it. I was like, what is that thing? It's got a black terminal and type things. It doesn't look that fun. So I wasn't into it at the time. Well, who knew? And came out to actually do that exact thing that he wanted me to do.
Oh, so how old were you when that changed, when you really decided, oh, wait, computers are interesting?
I think it was college, right? So I after coming to the US, and I think the internet was a big factor, right? So it was, once you hook up to the internet, you can look up for things and search for things, and it was still dial-up at the time, right? So it was 28 kilobits per second. And getting high-speed dial-up, that's 56K, right? So that was a thing. That was amazing. It was like, oh, you just double your speed. Yeah, I don't think you guys even know, or certainly haven't experienced that. That was
I definitely haven't.
Yeah. And it was just hot, right? And coming to the US, and you can kind of get exposed to a lot more different technology, and internet was a hot thing, computers was hot, and then I figured, hey, maybe I should look into that and do that more.
Yeah, so when you did come to the US, what was your first job?
My first job was in high school. I actually came to the US, and during high school, I had 1 semester or 1 year of high school there in California, and my first job was selling vacuum cleaners, and there was a brand called Kirby. I don't know if you have heard of it, but it was one of these very high-end. You can't find it in stores. You have to get it directly from a salesperson. It was kind of like selling, door to door, right? So what ends up happening was actually kind of funny. So I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver license at the time. So my mom would drive me around with a demo machine, right? So a demo Kirby machine. So think of a Dyson. So it's kind of like that, but it was a high end. It was like $1,800 or close to $2,000 for a vacuum cleaner 20 years ago. Super expensive. And I would drive, have my mom drive me place to place and just demo it, right? You call people up, cold call, and schedule time to show them that, and I sometimes I ended up in sort of kind of sketchy neighborhoods, and I feel like, well, there's no way that these people can afford the $2,000 worth of vacuum cleaners. So I ended up doing a lot of free cleaning for people, because I would just, you have to go there and do vacuums and demo and see how good those are, the machines are. It was a kind of an interesting first job. I did not do sales until much, much later. So there was a period of time I focused a lot on technology and engineering.
How far did you go down that rabbit hole before you really honed in on cybersecurity?
Interesting. It's actually pretty early that I started focusing on cybersecurity. And in college, I studied computer science. I went to NC State, right? So I actually did a combined BS MS program at NC State. So, and I got very interested in networking. So I did a lot of certifications on the side. So I remember going through all of the Cisco certifications, the CCNA, the CCNP, and the CCDA, and all of those things, right? And the Microsoft IT administration certificates and so on. And that somehow got me into, in my master's research, working on an anomaly detection system, right? So it's basically a network security software or appliance that monitors the traffic and use anomaly-based statistical analysis to detect intrusions and network-based attacks, right? And that was sort of my first entry into cybersecurity. Right? That wasn't a term at the time; it was just security or network security, and that's how I got started. Almost my entire career has been around networks and security and cybersecurity, right? So from there to Cisco and to doing some startups in the local area, and then to IBM and Fidelity, and now JupiterOne, it's all been around cybersecurity.
So when did you start JupiterOne?
About 3 years ago.
3 years ago. And
yeah,
why did you decide to start your own business? Was there a specific interest or something you weren't getting working for other companies?
Yeah, it's interesting how this kind of came about, right? So I have done startups before, right? So I have both good and bad experiences with startups. And my first startup experience was in the .com bubble, right? So about 20 years ago. And things were not going so great. On the East Coast, right? So I was at a startup on the East Coast. It was especially difficult to raise any money to be an East Coast startup. The entire VC fund was focused in the Silicon Valley area, and so we struggled quite a bit. But that was my first startup experience, right? So that startup ending, you're just going out of business, right? So we had to dismantle the team. But then later on, I had a little bit of other startup experience, sort of in a not fully committed way, right? So because I just had that pretty bad startup experience, I didn't want to take that risk right away again. So I had an opportunity to work with a local company in the Raleigh area, RTP area, called Magnus Health Technology. I don't know if you guys know about this, right? So you might actually be users of it. So
the school I went to last year had us fill out the Magnus Health app.
Yeah, which school was that?
I went to Ravenscroft last year.
Ah, well, there you go. Awesome. So I was the founding CTO for Magnus Health Technologies, right? So I worked directly with the two founders over there. And I wasn't full-time. I was doing that sort of part-time as I was doing other things. And but I helped them build the technology for about 3 years. I worked with them from the very beginning, when there was only 3 or 4 people, until there were about 100 people, right? So then I exited and started to do other things. So it was funny when my younger son went to Care Academy, right? This was 4 years ago. And we got this app and said, hey, you do your student medical records with using this app called Magnus. I was like, oh, I know that. I built that. It was pretty interesting. getting back to your question, right? So how did I end up starting JupiterOne and creating this company? It was a lot of that sort of early on entrepreneur type of mindset. I wanted to do something and build my own business and start my own company and all of those good things. But at the same time, I've always been a builder and engineer myself, right? So I had that, right? So I had this opportunity to join a startup as their CISO about 4 years ago. And that gave me this opportunity to build something to solve my own challenge as a security leader, right? So for all the years that I've had my own challenges building security teams and operating, the security operations, and I figured now that I can actually do something about it that can solve my own pain. Right, so I started doing that as the CISO for that company, and then ended up spinning that out as an independent company and to provide this product to everybody else. So that's the long story of how we came about building JupiterOne.
Right. The common theme I keep hearing from what you were saying is something bad happened, but you bounced back, right? There was a startup. You had to start building security teams from scratch. I'm sure there were endless problems with doing that. But how do you deal with difficult situations so well?
I don't think that I've been pretty fortunate, I would say, right? So I consider myself lucky that I really haven't had a whole lot of real kind of life-changing difficulties, right? I would say that. But there are challenges along the way, right? So there are challenges like that first startup that didn't go so well. I was actually laid off, early on, as part of the job. I was out of the job for a little while, and then I had to go back and find work and so on, right? So there are challenges, right? So I think there are absolutely challenges along the way. Things that didn't go so well, and rebuilding the team, right? So every once in a while I changed jobs and changed things, and I had to rebuild a team, and then ended up doing something else. So there's a lot of those challenges and scenarios. There's a couple of things I would say, right? So one is from my own kind of personal perspective, I feel like if you hold on to something that's meaningful to you, right, that you want to do, there are many ways that you can achieve that, right? So whether that is working at an amazing company and contributing there, or maybe working on open source projects, or maybe working on nonprofit, or just start your own business, right? So there are multiple ways that you can achieve what you believe is meaningful. And the second thing is to never be satisfied, right? So reflected on all of those years in the back and in the past, and I feel like it's important to be happy but not satisfied, right? So what I mean is, I'm very happy with what we've become, right? So as JupiterOne, for example, right now, and all of the achievements that we've made, but we should never be satisfied with how much we have accomplished so far, and always be hungry for that next thing, for the better things, right? So that's not just for grand visions like, hey, building a company and so on, but for the day-to-day as well, right? For the day-to-day that, when you're doing something, you're giving a presentation, or you're giving maybe even this interview right here, right? So after this interview, I will be reflecting on this and say, hey, how did I do about that? What are the things that we've chatted? Was there anything that I could have done better, right? So always have this mindset of it's never good enough, in a good way, in a positive way, right? So that's the second one. And the third one I'll mention is, there's throughout, a person's career or life, right? So there are plenty of other opportunities. Then you have to make decisions on, do I go do X or Y? Do I leave Fidelity and go do the startup, or do I stay at Fidelity and continue to grow my team over there, right? There's a lot of these really, really tough decisions that you come across as you grow your career and just live your life. Now, the thing I want to share is, you want to make sure that you're always running towards something and not running away from something, right? So the decisions you make has to be because you're excited about something and not because you try to run away and avoid something. And every time I think about, hey, is that new thing something that gets me excited about to do? Or is it because there's something that I don't like about what I'm currently doing that I just want to run away from it, right? If it's only because of the latter, then it's not a good thing to do, right? It's not a good sign for me to be running away from something. And it has to be I'm running towards something that gets me excited, even though that might mean that I'm leaving something behind that could be extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of wisdom that can apply to students. You mentioned never being satisfied. I mean, from a student perspective, there is that desire to always do better. And it doesn't need to be schoolwork, even things like spending time with family.
Yeah.
It always wanting to be a better son for me, maybe.
Yeah, I'll be a better father, right? So there's many things, yeah. So there's those three things, right? So, hold on to your passions. There are many ways to achieve them, and never be satisfied. You can always do better, and but be happy at the same time, right? So happy but not satisfied. And third is never run away from something, but always run towards something.
I find it really fascinating that you latched on to cybersecurity at a time when no one else was really talking about cybersecurity. So I'm really wondering who or what were your biggest inspirations for going down that path?
Yeah, I would have to give credit to many of my professors at NC State, right? So one of them in particular was Dr. Mladen Volk, and I think he's still there. And he was my advisor at for my graduate research. And he gave me the idea of doing this, anomaly detection thing for network traffic. But I certainly want to, give credit to him and many other professors at college that helped me get into this, right, and get exposure to networking and security and so on. The early reason I went into that was actually financial driven. It was interesting. I actually want to say that, hey, there's nothing wrong about wanting some material things, right? So I'm certainly fine with that. My perspective is, hey, you want a nice car, you should have a nice car, right? So you have to work for it. But one of the reasons was, at the time in college, I was looking at, hey, what can I do, right? So what is the highest paying job I can get, out of college as a technical person, right? So as an engineer. And then I did some research and I found people with the CCIE certification was paid on average over 100K, right? And again, this was like 20 years ago. It was really good paying job. And then I feel like, oh, that's what I wanted, right? So that actually got me started down the path of all of these Cisco certs. Now, funny thing was, I never got my CCIE, so I came close, right? So I did lots of these certs as the prerequisite before that, but I never did. I took a different path, right? So I went into security more so than networking. Right, so I took a different path and I got there, and then it just took different turns of my career, and I never ended needing it, right? So, but that was one of my initial inspirations.
So, what would you tell to the students who don't really know what they want to do? They don't have a clear-cut path.
I say that that's okay. I think that. It's still early, right? So, high school, early college days, and it's not unusual to not be sure at the beginning. I also think it's okay to experiment with different things, right? And at some point you would identify what makes you happy and what makes your life meaningful, and and also what makes your time, the 70, 80 years that you have here meaningful to others, right? So I think it's okay to not know at the beginning, but over time you figure it out. But the thing I'll say though to start with is that this is hard, right? This is hard work. Don't expect an easy button. Okay, there's no easy button in this, right? So and knowing that, right? So if you're committed to that, right? So you're committed to not take the easy way out, then you'll find your passion, right? So if you're thinking that, oh, I'm not sure because I just want to play video games all day, which by the way, you can also have a great outcome playing video games, right? You become one of these game producers or YouTube stars, and I don't know, it will be great too. But that's also hard work, right? It's not easy to get to that point, right? So you have to be committed to finding that passion, something that makes you feel fulfilled and happy, but not trying to find something that is just easy to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think then the rest you figure out.
Right, fulfilled and happy, but like you said earlier, not satisfied.
Yeah.
So I see you in your office. Can I ask what a typical day looks like for you working at JupiterOne?
Sure. Yeah. I typically have a ton of meetings, and I'm trying to minimize some of that, right? So I do a lot of meetings with my team and helping make the important decisions and helping build the products, talking about product features and roadmaps and things like that, and talking to customers, right? So a lot of my time is meetings with customers and explaining them about JupiterOne and kind of showing them the roadmaps and so on and so forth. And there's also times that I would find, hopefully, to write a blog or two. I actually just wrote one last week, and it's probably going to get published tomorrow.
What's your blog?
This particular one is around S3 security in AWS, right? S3 is that storage service that Amazon Web Services provides, and all the different ways that data can be inadvertently become public. When you put data into S3, and then how do you identify them, right? How do you identify them using a graph-based data model and technology? So that's what the blog is about. So I'll do a lot of meetings. I'll try to write blog. I still try to write code if I have time. And my team was like, "Hey, you got to stop writing code," and and I couldn't help it. I think it's fun, to still do that sometimes, to stay engaged into the weeds a little bit, right? So the technology part of it.
Right, I know you're very focused on engaging everybody because I read your manifesto for modern cybersecurity. Could you
Cool.
kind of summarize that and what the inspiration for that was?
Yeah. So that was when I first took the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer role after I left Fidelity. And the reason for that was that for many years, I've seen the disconnect between the cybersecurity organization and the rest of the organization, right? So engineering and so on. And to a point where, security teams are often viewed as the blocker, the people who say no, right? So, engineering is working on a project, and if you want that project dead in the water, you go talk to the security guy. That's what happens. I wanted to make sure that there's a new culture and a new mentality, a new operating model going into it, right? So I created these 6 different things, and to sum it up and just to say, hey, rather than security going against the rest of the organizations are the people who say no's and the blocking people, right? So the police, right? So if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we be more of the doctor or the wellness coach, right? So to help make everybody's life better. right? And sort of collaborate this way, right? So it's not a one-way street. Like, for example, your health, right, is not your doctor's responsibility or your wellness coach responsibility, but it's this kind of joint effort, right, between the two of you. Right, so they can provide you some advice and they can help you fix things when it's not going well. But at the end of the day, it's also up to you, right, to take care of your own, physical conditions and your own health, right? So I wanted to use sort of that mentality and the mindset to operate security, so that it becomes more of a collaborative effort. That's what drove me creating that manifesto.
How has reframing that, basically your occupation, changed the way you work?
I think it's both sides, right? So you make it challenging on one hand, but it's also rewarding, right? So that there's more collaboration, between the engineering teams and the security teams, of course, right? As a result, but it also presented a lot of practical challenges in how security works, right? Because then, by default, you have to provide very easy to use solutions for the rest of the company to adopt. And oftentimes the security solutions and processes and tools and so on are not designed to work that way, right? They're designed to block, they're designed to restrict, right? They're not designed to enable, right? So it does present practical challenges. And then there's compliance requirements that makes it sometimes even harder, right? Then, if a compliance says, oh, you have to do this, but it's difficult to do, then we have to find ways of, meeting the compliance requirements, but still make it easy for the users, right? So those are some of the practical challenges that we run into. It's a continued effort, right? I don't think that anybody had solved it yet, but I think we're certainly going in the right direction with that new mindset.
Are there any messages you have for our young Asian American audience, whether or not they want to be entrepreneurs who are just viewing this video?
I think I feel like we covered a lot, right? So I don't think there's necessarily anything more to add. I think I'm just super excited to help this community, right, as much as I can. And I think leverage for Asian Americans, right? So leverage what we have to its advantage, right? So I think our heritage, and a lot of us are bilingual, right? So I think we should use that to our advantage, in pursuing the dreams, right? So whether it's science or business or something else.
Yeah, that's great. Mr. Zheng, thank you so much for your time. On behalf of Asian American News Network, we sincerely appreciate it. And this will be a great resource for all of our viewers.
Well, thank you. Well, I've enjoyed the conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one.
Yeah.